and we're going to recap very quickly because we do want to get into the new material. Last week we covered, the topic is it settled science? That's going to be the title of every message. Is it settled science? Evolution, is it settled science? And last week we covered the topic of abiogenesis, basically meaning where did life begin? How did it begin? And last week was very easy because we asked the question, is it settled science? And it was a very easy question to answer. The answer was obviously no, because even the evolutionists said, we don't know. Even the textbook that I read, the high school textbook, 9th grade textbook, Dynamics of Life, literally said there is no scientific evidence for the beginning of life. We have no idea. Then they spent the rest of the chapter trying to show all this evidence that they just said didn't exist, but I digress. That's nothing I can really do about that. But they admit in their pages, we don't know. Richard Dawkins we welcomed a real scientist into the classroom, Richard Dawkins. He came in and he told us some really profound information. He said, I don't know and nobody knows. And I said, well, that's great. We agree. So when we talk about is it settled science, did life come from no life? Did life come from some sort of primordial soup and some self-replicating cell developed naturally? The answer is no, it's not settled science. It's a belief that people have and they try to support that, but even the evolutionists will admit, you can get on Google. Go home, get on Google tonight, type, how did life begin? And you'll have a page, click on any link, you'll have a page of like 7 or 8 different things they think might have happened, and they'll all say, we don't know. So that was an easy one. This one is a little more difficult, but remember what I want to do. I want to have, how many people in here are scientists? Raise your hand. I mean real scientists.
You want me to be honest?
Yeah.
Over here?
Okay, so we got one scientist in the room. He is a scientist. What do you study?
Geology.
Geology, which is? Math. Okay. So we have 0 scientists. We have 0 scientists in the room. So what? Listen, I was joking about this in Sunday school. When I read quotes, I have to take my eyes off of the class and put it down on a piece of paper. And I literally know what's happening as soon as I take my eyes down and start reading. The whole class is like, I mean, they just stop listening. But the thing is, I can feel your eyes just wandering around the room. I can see your attention, like even though I'm not looking at it right now. But anyways, but we have to read a lot of quotes. Why do we have to read a lot of quotes in a topic like this? Why do we have to read a lot of quotes if we're going to cover a topic like this?
To keep our attention.
No, that's the opposite.
Oh.
Why do we have to read a lot of quotes?
To prove it, so that's not just like pulled out of nowhere.
Right. Number one, I don't want to be standing up here saying, yeah, this is what I think, this is my opinion. But number two, I don't study astrophysiology. I don't study the cosmos. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not an expert in the field of any type of science, really. So that's why we invited Richard Dawkins into our Wednesday night youth group, because we wanted to hear from some real scientists. And so we have to read quotes from real scientists so that they can give us some credentialed information. Credentialed, like it has some weight. And so I want to invite them into the room and allow them to speak a little bit tonight. What is the Big Bang Theory? That's our topic. And remember, is it settled science? Now, please try to keep your statements somewhat intelligent. What is the Big Bang Theory, Jasmine?
It's like a huge comet or cosmo that like hit the Earth and wiped out every living thing.
You're way off.
It's what?
No.
The Big Bang? Is that what you said?
Tanner.
It was a massive explosion that created everything, supposedly.
Okay, somewhat. You're on the right track. I mean, yes, you're right, but they would probably use different words than massive explosion that created everything.
There was no life, and then all of a sudden there was life, so life came from that.
That's abiogenesis. We want to go back like 13 billion years.
I believe it's on ABC.
It's just a puzzle.
That on TV
It's
show?
just
TV show, yeah. Okay, basically, listen, that's okay. Listen, we want to understand what the Big Bang Theory is. I will read it right out of, and now listen, last week I was quoting a high school textbook. This week I'll be quoting a book that I had in college that literally,
That's more my level.
I tried to sell it, but they were like, listen, I tried to, now that we have college, now that we have college books, everybody's in, right? Okay, I tried to sell this book, they wouldn't take it, so I just held on to it. I said, maybe I'll have some use for it eventually, and I had some use for it as I was studying for this topic. So here's here is the Big Bang Theory according to my science textbook. It's called Cosmic Evolution. Telescopic observation. All right, everybody pay attention. I'm going to read a quote. Telescopic observations of distant galaxies show that the entire universe is expanding. That's easy,
Oh, I
right?
got that. I want that.
We do have to understand what the Big Bang Theory is before we rip it apart. Amen. Okay, telescopic observations of distant galaxies show that the entire universe is expanding. So you look at a telescope, and they did measurements, and me and my wife were talking about some of that earlier. We don't have time to get into that. But basically, you see an expanding universe. Great. Meaning that the average distances between galaxies are increasing with time, okay? Galaxies are getting further and further apart from each other. This fact implies that galaxies must have been closer. Remember, we like that word must have, right?
Must have.
We talked about that word a lot last week. Must have been closer together in the past, and if we go back far enough, we must reach the point at which the expansion began. We call this beginning the Big Bang. Okay, and from observed rate of expansion, we estimate that occurred about 14 billion years ago. Is everybody with me? They look out into the telescope. They see that galaxies and the cosmos are expanding. Therefore, they make an extrapolation. Sorry about my sleeve coming out, but it is what it is.
I'm staring at it.
Anyways, so they say because things are expanding, that at some point they were smaller, and if you go back far enough, they're going to come down to a single point. They call it a singularity.
Like a
And
ball.
like a ball.
Science.
And from that point, that's when it started, and they did some math, and they say that's about 14 billion years ago. Okay, so that's the Big Bang. Actually, the Big Bang was named by a man who was ridiculing the Big Bang, Sir Fred Hoyle, not Francis Hoyle, Fred Hoyle. And he was actually ridiculing it. He was like, oh yeah, so it was just like a Big Bang. And so anyway, and so the universe expands, and that's based on the observation. The Big Bang Theory is based on the observation that the universe is expanding. Let's go to the scientific method like we did last week. What was our first step?
State the problem.
Yeah,
Or the
and
question.
right. So what's our question in this case?
What is the
Settled
Big Bang?
science.
Where did the universe come from? That's the question that we're trying to find out. And the observation that we make is that it's expanding. So state the question, where did the universe come from? The observation that they made is what?
With a telescope.
Not what they used. The observation that they make is what?
That the universe is
The
expanding.
universe is expanding. Okay, and so what's the next step we need to do?
Experiment.
We need to run an experiment. So what experiment can we run that will tell us how the universe began? What experiment can we run that will tell us how the universe began?
Well, I'll tell you right now.
Like
You
try
can
to
read
make
the
life
Bible.
Amen. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
And you're done.
Genesis
And
1:1.
you're done. The end.
And that's that. No, and that is that. But listen, listen, pay attention. We're trying to find out what... I got to look at this side of the room. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to avoid looking at the camera. What kind of experiment can be run... Guys, quiet. What kind of experiment can we run to find out how everything began? Why? Why can't we run an experiment?
recreate what happened, but you don't.
You gotta take it down to microscope.
You can't test something that happened in history. Especially if you're talking about 14 billion years ago. It's impossible to run an experiment. So what may a scientist do?
Try to recreate it.
Try to recreate it. Now, are they going to be able to? Now, last week, good. So last week we talked about they're going to try to recreate the beginning of life. That's how they were trying to answer the question, where did life come from? How did life come from non-life? Have they been successful in recreating life? No. Have they even been successful in recreating anything close to life? Really not.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, so yeah, only in fantasy worlds. Okay, and so, pay attention now. And so, I don't think that a scientist is honestly thinking they're going to be able to recreate the beginning of the universe, okay? So what else might they do to try to give some credence or some validity,
What is that?
to make it valid? This is very important, follow with me. We're probably not going to get through all this. It is what it is.
We
What-
say that every week. So.
No, but we're really not going to get through this because I'm still on. This is where I'm at.
Y'all need to step it up, do this college level.
Paragraph 1. I got 4
I'm
pages.
already on step 4.
Okay, and that's okay because it's more important to understand it than to zoom through it. Okay. What kind of experiment might we do, or what may a scientist think they could do to give validity to the Big Bang Theory? Obviously, they're not going to try to recreate the Big Bang.
Try to recreate life. Like try to make life from nothing.
We just went over they tried this.
That-
All right.
But that's what we said last week.
Any thoughts? No, that we're talking about the
You
Big
want a
Bang. The
theologian?
Big Bang is the beginning of everything.
Wait, then what?
Last week we just talked about the beginning of life.
Oh.
So as the scientific model would go, or I should say the mainstream scientific model, goes, there was billions and billions of years before life even started, and it was called cosmic evolution, and it was the evolution of the cosmos, stars and planets and whatnot. At any rate, what might you try to do to prove the Big Bang? Think about it.
What
Research.
can I do?
What can you research?
Recreate it. Shoot two nukes at each other. Create
Are
another
you
space station.
trying to think of like experimentation wise?
Yeah, I mean, you need to give validity to it. I'll tell you, I can
There's
see.
nothing you can do.
Alright, so,
Or you could start something and see if it expands. Say
Alright.
things that are similar to.
Spin a ball.
I'm going to get you on the right track here, Lord willing.
Probably not.
The Big Bang, they call it a theory. Now, we talked about last week what a theory was. A theory is something that is basically, it's actually observable, testable. You run experiments on it. As you run experiments on it, the experiments have, just tested out over and over and over and over and over again to the point that it's basically irrefutable by any science. It's falsifiable. Falsifiable means you actually could run an experiment that could actually disprove it, and it stands the test of time. So it shouldn't be called the Big Bang Theory. It should be called the Big Bang Model. But the point of the matter is, if you have a model of what you think happened in the history of the universe, what might you do to try to, this is a little difficult, I understand, we haven't talked about this, but what might you try to do to get, to give validity to your model?
What is
I'm going to give you the answer.
We told you already.
I'm going to give you the answer.
I heard
You're
Mark-
going to make, listen, you're going to make a prediction.
Oh, okay.
So, here's what the Big Bang theorists did. They said, I actually kind of skipped ahead, but I don't want to get off topic, so we'll come back to this. But basically, we'll come back to the prediction in just a second. So, we will get there in just a second. In 1929, Edwin Hubble discovers that galaxies are expanding. Okay, boom. He hypothesizes that it all began at a single point. Okay, good. Hypothesis. Now we're going to try to test that. In 1948, okay, Ralph Alpharin, I think is how you say it, predicted the existence of cosmic microwave background. Now, how many people, everyone knows what cosmic microwave background is? No? Right. We don't really fully understand that, but that's okay because we're preaching to common people. The average common person doesn't know what that is anyway, so it doesn't matter, but we can still make a point. Ralph Alpharin predicted, he made a prediction. Okay, he said we're going to try to test the Big Bang, this idea of everything expanding from a single point by making a prediction about it. His prediction is this. He says there will be the existence of cosmic microwave background, and for laymen like me, a cosmic microwave background is basically this: a heat signature left behind by the Big Bang. So he said, I believe the Big Bang happened, and I think if the Big Bang happened, we would see a cosmic microwave background, which is a heat signature. Basically, when this is happening, it will leave behind observable heat in the cosmos that we can find. And lo and behold, in 1965, this microwave background was discovered, thus lending evidence to the Big Bang. So this is really how the Big Bang got its, wheels turning. They made one other prediction that came, they made a lot of predictions, by the way. That's what we're going to come to in just a second. They made one other, is everybody with me here?
Yep, I'm there.
How are we testing the Big Bang in this scenario?
Microwaves.
No.
By heat.
No. How are we testing it? We're making a prediction, and the prediction was that we would find a CMB, or a cosmic microwave background. Lo and behold, they found it. So that's actually real science. So, now, to teach that the Big Bang Theory is true and destroy the faith of millions and millions of kids based on that, not very good. But at any rate, that's real science. And by the way, I'm not critiquing real science. I think that these things are worthwhile. The problem with the mainstream scientific community is simply this: they assume no God. And when you literally rule out the truth, you're going to be wrong, no matter what you conclude. But anyway, Is it settled science? Okay, is it settled science? We're not here to prove God, because that's not the topic of this discussion. But the point of the matter is, they discovered microwave background. They also made one other prediction here that came true. The universe will have an abundance of hydrogen and helium. And guess what? The universe has an abundance of hydrogen and helium. And so the Big Bang gained mainstream. How much time do I have, by the way? I don't know when I started.
7:41 right now.
And how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
What time you usually go to the bus for?
By 8.
We don't go to
Like 20
Brandon.
minutes.
Like 7:50.
Okay,
8:30.
by 8 gives us a half hour. Okay, so this is how the Big Bang, listen, this is how the Big Bang really got going. This is easy to understand. Okay, listen, even hillbillies from Cecil County and some from Oxford. Anybody from Oxford? Wow, we have lost Oxford. There's no Oxford people here,
Yankees.
except the cameraman.
Yankees.
You're Oxford. He's trying to deny it, but he's from Oxford. He's like, no, I spent all my time in Maryland, I swear. But you live in Oxford. Your mom owns
Wow,
Oxford.
you're
Oh,
from
sorry, I don't want to
Canada,
put
bro.
anybody on. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, anyway, so we got one. I'm actually from Nottingham, so that makes me also.
Brandon, you're from Delaware.
That's true.
That's even worse.
That's true. I like Delaware. My retired.
hide it.
Nottingham.
Good point. Okay, let's zoom back in. But listen, even hillbillies from Rising Sun can understand this basic principle. They made some predictions. The predictions came true. Therefore, it gives evidence to our theory. Okay, or not our theory, to our model. Okay, let's keep going then. What do science textbooks, we're trying to find out, is it settled science? So does that settle it? You may say no just because you agree with me and you believe the Bible. Amen. I also don't agree with it. But is it settled science? Let's look at what the textbooks don't tell you. Number one, the Big Bang violates the first law of thermodynamics and the law of conservation of mass, which everybody knows what they are, right?
Yep.
Amen. All right, I'll tell you what they are. Which say that energy and matter cannot be created or destroyed. Energy and matter cannot be created nor destroyed. The Big Bang does not, nor does it even attempt to explain the origin of energy and matter. Okay, just follow with me. Basic law of nature. Basic law of science. Basic laws. Things are not created nor destroyed. Right? We learned that in school. The only time things are created or destroyed is when we need them to be created or destroyed in order to make our ideas about no God work. But at any rate, that's neither here nor there. Stephen Hawking says this in a lecture, and I have all I'm not going to read you every single reference because we don't have time, but in one lecture he was giving, he says this. Stephen Hawking says, since events before the Big Bang have no observational consequences, in other words, can't observe them, right? One may as well cut them out of the theory and say that time began at the Big Bang. Events before the Big Bang are simply not defined because there's no way one could measure what happened at them. So basically, Stephen Hawking is saying, and this is fair, it's a fair thing to say, sort of, if you assume the Big Bang's true, which we don't, but it's fair. He's saying, basically, we have no idea what happened before the Big Bang. Basically, we have no explanation for it. There's nothing we can observe. There's nothing we can test. It's basically irrelevant. We just kind of start at the Big Bang and go from there. But he does not address the central point. What is the biggest question that an average person has about the Big Bang? Think about it. Just think clearly here for a second. Get back to your starting point. Big Bang, what's the biggest question? The most obvious question?
What's the Big Bang?
Where did we come from?
Yeah, I think Kennedy's about to say it, but you're close. You're on.
Not even.
Just say it.
Where did the comments?
No comments.
I don't know.
Don't listen to Jasmine. We're not talking about
Where
comments.
did the material come from?
Where did the material come from? I mean, they say that everything was here and then everything expanded. Listen, it's a basic question. It's a fine question to ask. As Stephen Hawking basically says in this particular lecture that he was lecturing, there's no way one can measure what happened. There's no way to know, so we're just going to kind of go from the Big Bang and go from there. Okay? We have no, I wrote this, we have no explanation for the beginning of time, space, and matter, so just start with the Big Bang and take the rest by faith. We're not really sure, we can't observe it, it's beyond science, therefore, is it settled science? No, it's beyond science, we can't even observe it. We don't know anything about it. Where did the original material come from? Where did matter come from? Where did space come from? Where did time? Think about this. Where was that singularity at? It was in space. So where was space at? Where did space come from? And so you could ask,
Well,
these are
yeah.
basic questions that, listen, and as a former atheist and as a former evolutionist, listen to me,
Huh?
as a former atheist and as a former evolutionist, these questions didn't bother me. You understand? If Tristan come out and he was witnessing to me, and he said, yeah, but where did that come from? And yeah, where did that come from? Those are actually good questions. They're actually, it just settles that their theory has some holes, or their ideas, their models have holes, and they're not completely explained. They're certainly not settled science. But as an evolutionist and as an atheist, some dumb Christian saying to me, well, where did that come from? Where that just says to me, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not asking intelligent questions. They are intelligent questions, but I'm telling you that they're not convincing questions. And Pastor, you've debated atheist after atheist after atheist, and you've probably asked these basic questions, and they probably said you're a moron, right? Okay. And so even though that's a pretty good question, it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold water to an atheist. I just want you to understand that. But it's a good question. Okay, so number one, they violate the first law of thermodynamics and the law of conservation of matter. Number two, we talked about this last week, and guess what? We're going to talk about this all the way through because it's the most important thing. What does the Big Bang Theory assume?
We
came from
a
nothing.
big
That there is no...
Nothing, anything.
There's no God. There can be no... It's naturalism. There can be no supernatural explanation for nature. So no matter what, can't be God. Cannot be God. So, even though we don't have an explanation, we know one thing's for sure, supernatural. And listen, that's fine. Listen, can I... It's okay for a scientist to say, I'm going to try to find out the natural answer without God. God set up the laws of nature. The reason we're able to have... measure gravity and measure velocity and measure, the Earth's rotation and all these things is because of God. And that's great. But when you're going to talk about origins, if you're going to... So anyway, I kind of got off track there. But the point is, it is okay for a scientist to try to explain the world without God, but or to explain nature without the use of God. That's science. I mean, they're trying to figure some things out. But to say there is no God is a major assumption that is... If you want to talk about you can't disprove the Big Bang, you certainly can't disprove God. There's no argument that exists that proves God is not real. Even if the Big Bang was true, even if evolution were true, even if life came about by non-life, that still can't prove that there's not a God. It would prove the Bible is wrong, which, by the way, is Satan's goal. So that's why these things are so hardcore attacked. Satan doesn't care if you believe in some deity. By the way, most Americans aren't atheists. But most Americans, I would say, reject the Bible. They may not say they reject